department. So I just studied, natural products, plants, nutritional biochemistry, really everything I could. And then went, right from there, got a job working at the National Cancer Institute to purify one of the first immune therapies that was actually a curative therapy for leukemia, known as hairy cell leukemia. And so that started my journey. I just love making medicine, prevention, treatment of disease. And it's been a roller coaster ever since.
Absolutely. A lot of your early work that you're known for was with HIV and AIDS. And for people who aren't listening, who aren't familiar with your history and your story, talk to us a little bit about what you did there, because you're kind of known as a pioneer in that area for things you discovered, and talk a little bit about that.
Well, so after I finished my job in the purification with the interferons, I learned of this program starting up called the Biological Response Modifiers Program. And so this was the first translational program where we take biological responses and take the patients, doctors, nurses. I was just a technician, PharmDs, PhDs, technicians, and everybody would work together, translating the whole patient systems biology approach before the term was even coined. And that was probably the most fun I had in all of science. Well, at that place, we actually had the patients there in Frederick, Maryland. We had a small grocery store that they turned into a clinic across the street from the Cancer Institute. And I was part of the team that isolated HIV, then called LAV, that Luc Montagnier had isolated from some French patients with what was called gay-related immune deficiency at the time. So I met the patients. I understood. I could see the destruction of their immune system. I isolated the virus and just basically spent the next the rest of my lifetime trying to understand how viruses cause acquired immune deficiencies. And now we appreciate, I call them acquired endocannabinoid immune deficiencies, because now we know there's an endogenous cannabinoid system that crosstalks with the immune system. So we were part of the team that with Candace Pert, Dr. Setti, and my team made peptide T. And your listeners can go watch, or your viewers can go watch the Dallas Buyers Club. So this was an immune modulator. It wasn't toxic. And I started to see, why wouldn't the government approve it? Why wouldn't the FDA approve it? So I started throughout this time to see how the government would block the discovery made by these amazing people, worldwide. Why would you block approval of natural products in favor of toxic drug? And over the years, it got worse and worse. So during that time in the 80s, the T cells, the destruction, the way people determined you had AIDS was if your T cells was your CD4 T cells, the helper T cells they were called, were below a certain level, say 200, doesn't really matter what the number is. So when they got that low and you disrupted the balance, you got all kinds of opportunistic infections. So all kinds of things that healthy people really shouldn't be infected with, and certainly not dying of. And so one of the things we knew at the time was that only 1 in 10,000 T cells were infected. And so what the doctors said was it was bystander effects. And I'm like, well, that's not a highly scientific term. So I engaged in a PhD program at George Washington University. Dr. Rossetti was my mentor. And I simply hypothesized that the orchestrator of AIDS was a different part of the immune system. And if we could prevent that part of the immune system from the virus from waking up or crippling that part of your immune system, then of course people could have HIV and never develop AIDS. And that was my PhD thesis. Now we had to change everything. We had to change the way we treated, the way we diagnosed. We had to use drugs in very, very low dose so that they weren't toxic. So you had to do everything you can to keep your immune system healthy so that you could keep a balance and would never have those bystander effects kill those T cells. And ultimately, as we know today, that's what happened. So at a time when I thought we couldn't possibly. I mean, the healthy, beautiful young men were just dropping like flies. It was scary. It was probably one of the scariest times of my entire life. So I wasn't afraid of isolating the virus and working there because just I don't know why. None of this is ever. I'm not afraid. I really trust God, and I think we know enough about our immune systems to keep basically any microorganism from becoming a pathogen if we know how to keep our immune systems in balance. And those are the kinds of immune therapies and drugs I've developed all along. And of course, you know, it moved on to where in 1999 I was appointed to be the director of then the world-renowned laboratory of antiviral drug mechanisms. So our whole job was to look and see how we could develop drug therapies, immune therapies, and other things to prevent viruses from causing disease. That is, so you can be infected. And so now we know HIV doesn't cause AIDS because in order to be causative, every person with the virus has to have the disease. And we now see pre-exposure prophylaxis commercials. We give these highly active antiviral drug therapies. We give them to the infected or to the susceptible free. And of course, now we know that we rarely see an AIDS patient from HIV anymore, certainly from other causes.
You know, in your latest book, Plague of Corruption, you outline some of the things that happened. Some things happened to you. Things got kind of, I'll use the word dicey. You ended up getting arrested because you had to stand up for ethical reasons for research you were doing. For our viewers who aren't familiar with that part of your story, talk a little bit about why you took a stand and how that landed you in jail and what happened after that.
Well, that actually was the topic of our first book, which was called Plague. And so basically in our studies, once we'd isolated a new family of cancer causing and neuroimmune disease causing or associated retroviruses, because now we know you can have a lot of people with the virus who will never get the disease. So we associated a new family of mouse retroviruses with myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is called chronic fatigue syndrome here, with a number of cancers and blood diseases, with autism spectrum disorders. And we looked at those families just as we did back in the biological response modifiers program. And you know, in 2011, when we found really the number of diseases associated and the extent of the contamination of the blood supply, the extent of the infected people, which was 25 times HIV/AIDS at the height of infection in this country. And we knew what it cost because the services and the providing, life resources, as I just mentioned, free drugs, because it was in fact a contaminated blood supply that spread this virus through the population, and not, as we were told, our bad behavior or the bad behavior of the IV drug users, the gay men. It was called gay-related immune deficiency. Ultimately, it was called AIDS, acquired immune deficiency. And acquiring an immune deficiency can come from a lot of sources. And one of our colleagues mentioned in a publication in early 2011 that the most likely way mouse viruses got into humans was biological therapies, those very biological response modifiers that we were making back between 83 and 87 in that program. And that, so between a contaminated in blood supply and contaminated vaccines with lots of different viruses, animal cancer causing viruses from monkeys, and even the relatives of HIV are in those vaccines. When we inject animal tissues with human tissues, we know fetal tissue, aborted fetal tissue, is used in the manufacture of vaccines and has been for decades. So when we realized, and we as a scientific community realized that that extent of damage likely came from contaminated vaccines and a blood supply that had been contaminated since HIV. because one of the confirmatory studies for our paper came from Shai-Xing Lo and Harvey Alter. Our paper was published in Science October 8th. And so within 6 months, or probably even sooner than that, a doctor who had worked in HIV for the FDA, Shai-Xing Lo, and had been working on mycoplasma at the time, being a causative agent of AIDS, and his boss, the Lasker Award winner, Harvey Alter, actually validated our results because he took a box from the freezer that he called non-HIV AIDS that had been frozen since the 80s. And why did he call it non-HIV AIDS? Well, because number one, there was no evidence of HIV in these patient samples, and yet the patients clinically had immune deficits, had T cell, the kinds of things we just talked about, the problems of T cells at low numbers and the balance of their immune system off. And they were women and children, and they were nurses. They were not in the susceptible. They weren't IV drug users, prostitutes, and so the big oh my God, at that time he found 86% positive for XMRVs, the mouse retroviruses. That's what MRV means, xenotropic, because it's in a human, not in a mouse. And murine leukemia, murine cancer causing virus, retrovirus, related retrovirus. So that they found 86%, but importantly, they found over 6% in the control populations, in supposedly healthier carry individual. And that's between 20 and 40 million Americans. And honestly, as Hillary Johnson wrote in the foreword of our first book, Plague, the title of the foreword was "A Disease to Affect the Economies of Nations." We simply couldn't afford. So that we couldn't afford to protect our lab workers when we realized this was contagious, that lab workers were getting sick, getting these diseases. Their children were getting autism because retroviruses, especially the XMRVs, can infect every cell of the body, even the sperm and the egg, and can be transmitted vertically as well as horizontally. That means to children, to grandchildren. So here we've got a virus that can activate and is associated with all these diseases, can't afford it. So instead of doing the right thing and retrofitting our laboratories biosafety level 3 like HIV, and recognizing the extent of the damage in 2011, the government just tried to just destroy the evidence and do a character assassination on me and send a message to anybody else who ever did this kind of research again, that their career, if not their life, would be over. And that's what both books, the first book is much more science, but the second book is, the second book is everything else we learned. So it's just a suspense thriller. And fortunately, it's not a murder mystery.
So let me just try to summarize this really quick for the listener. A lot of these chronic diseases that we're seeing now were perpetuated from research being done in the laboratories and the creation of these contaminated vaccines.
Yeah, accelerated is a better word. It's not causal because we know we had cases of autism and or like Lou Gehrig's disease in the world, but they were accelerated so much so that now we hold bucket challenges for ALS, and so everybody's got it. So the explosion of chronic disease was in a major part driven by these contaminated blood supplies and contaminated vaccines.
And so it was accelerated because it was compromising people's immune systems, allowing them to become more susceptible to these things that we were already being exposed to for probably hundreds of years without having widespread consequences then.
Correct. And the environmental toxins such as formaldehyde, polysorbate 80, aluminum, mercury, that further compromise the immune system, allowing the adventitious agents, they call them, even Borrelia. mycoplasma, mold. Think about the mast cell activation disorders. It wasn't just in these cell cultures. When we grow these cultures in the lab, we add antibiotics, we add antibiotics. So your children, before they even develop a healthy microbiome, are being injected with antibiotics. So they're skewing the balance of the microbiome that we now appreciate is so critical to regulating the immune system and the endocannabinoid system. So yeah, it's everything. And the more we can clearly see, and we do cases as expert witnesses in vaccine court, showing the damage, the more the susceptible family members, that's people with other autoimmune diseases, histories of cancer in their families. They work with environmental toxins such as glyphosate, such as farmers, who are spraying their crops, and that's crippling their immune system. Everything from jet fuel to pilots with oxidative stress because they're flying all the time. So yes, you're just driving the disease and the more shots, the more injections, the sicker these kids get. And of course, there's a lot of death there.
There's Dr. Judy, there's a lot of speculation in the public about where this latest virus, the coronavirus, came from. It's human nature for us to want to know where it came from, why this is happening. And, there's talk that it came from an animal at a market. There's talk that it's been created in a lab. With all of your expertise on viruses and how they act and react, what does the science point to here?
Well, the science is pretty clear from a 2015 Nature Medicine paper. And that is, that paper said that the lab at Wuhan obtained a cell line called Vero E6 monkey kidney cells. So cells that harbor HIV and all these other monkey viruses and mouse viruses, things we've mentioned. And so they got that cell line well before 2015 from Fort Detrick, from USAMRIID, the Army Medical Research Institute's biosafety level 4 facility. They worked with that cell line. They grew the virus from the bat. They took them from the small molecules. They grew it in a cell line. So when you do that in a laboratory, it's by definition not a natural evolution, because these cells grow continuously. They're immune compromised in the cell line. They don't make type 1 interferons, the very interferon that is needed to suppress those viruses that I first made in 1980 as a therapeutic for viral infections and viral associated cancers. So they don't have that in this cell line, and that's why it grows so well. So it's a little virus factory. So you're not getting the mutation. So you're growing a little virus factory, and a lot of changes can happen that can accelerate, I say, the evolution. It's not a natural evolution. If left to the wild, a bat in a market or anything else, uncooked, cooked, the viruses just can't easily adapt to infect human cells. They need to go through an animal intermediate. In this case, it's clear from the science, it's that cell line.
And I was actually curious about that. I don't have a background in virology and these types of studies like you do. I have more of a medical background. And we've been asking so many questions about this. And, just from the background that I have, it didn't make sense to me that something from an animal would just jump into a human and start making them sick. And so I was really wondering about, was this altered and created in some sort of a laboratory atmosphere? And then, then it got released, and that's why people are struggling like that.
Right. And we call it nosocomial, because even if it happened in a laboratory, most healthy people wouldn't get desperately ill from a coronavirus because they have no other comorbidities. They have no other immune compromised state like we're talking about. Now, in the autistic, in the vaccine injured. They have mitochondrial deficiencies. They have very low glutathione. Glutathione, the intracellular antioxidant, is what you must have to make sure you can stop this virus from killing you. It is by way of oxidative stress primarily that it kills you, as well as alteration of your epigenetics. That is your DNA methylation machinery. Key to silencing these viruses is the epigenetics. That was, in my postdoctoral career, another paradigm shifting discovery we made about how these viruses cause disease. And then that inflammatory signature, that fire that's up too high, that again, the compromise can't silence it. But most healthy people will just be exposed, even at a seafood market, if they got a normal exposure. So it's only the compromising. Clearly, all the clinical data show that it's less than a normal upper respiratory infection in the healthy. And in the compromised, it's still even comparable to a normal influenza, which of course can kill people with elderly with comorbidities. In the average age of death from COVID-19, which again, I will still dispute. I will dispute to my death that it is caused by SARS coronavirus 2, wherever it came from. A single agent doesn't cause disease. The symptoms of that are being reported by the clinicians. Literally have nothing to do with the infectious range, the kind of pathogenesis that coronaviruses do. They infect these cells. They don't infect every cell of the body. They don't. I've seen psychosis. I've seen burning skin. I've seen skin lesions. And I'm like, no, that's vaccine injury. That's not coronaviruses. That's what we see in vaccine court. And so, what's the disconnect here? What are we doing, and how are we, driving people in a fearful way? I don't know if you know much about the autistic community, but they are extremely depleted of oxygen. So mitochondrial deficiency, glutathione deficiency, those kids will die with those masks on. Those kids will go into, they will go into anxiety. They will go into rage. That's not a virus. That's the methods that have been told to us would heal this virus. And so the very most compromised and the very most injured, because of the criminality of a government that removed all liability from vaccines in 1986, and for 36 years no safety testing has been done. No people have been allowed to make discoveries like we've made, and if they do make those discoveries, they either end up losing their careers or their lives, as we detail other investigators in our book, Plague of Corruption. So COVID-19 is a plague of corruption, and the coronavirus isn't what any of us should be worried about. We should be worried about the forced and mandated vaccination, because these vaccines will kill the original victims. It's a deadly combination, and we know that how the viruses and the immune systems respond. So I feel like it's the detonate switch.
Yeah. And, stepping back and kind of just looking at the whole picture over the last, and I'm just going to throw out 30 years because it definitely is, probably been going, things have been getting set up for a much longer period of time. But just for the time frame that I can remember as an adult, I can go back and take a look at, like, we've been set up inside the perfect storm. I mean, in the last 30 years, we've seen, kids who used to only get, this many vaccines, like, I don't know, 7 vaccines. Now they're getting 50 or 60 vaccines now by the time that they're in 3rd grade or 4th grade, right? Something like that. Like, I don't know the exact, but I know that it's gone up a lot. And these vaccines do compromise the immune system, and they do cause issues with the blood-brain barrier, which then leads to other problems. I mean, there's so many problems that the vaccines cause, plus our diet. I mean, it's so full of contaminants, from, preservatives to insecticides, just so many things that further make the body sick. And then we've got environmental toxins that are in our makeup, in our perfumes, in the air that we breathe, in the food that we eat, in the clothes that we wear. So, and this has gotten so bad over the last 30 years. And you can see a very stark increase. And I've actually shown this in graphs, in graphic overlays, in some of my master classes that I've done on mental health, that with the increase in, for example, glyphosate use, just that alone, you've seen a stark increase in a lot of these different mental health and other chronic diseases. And so, what you're saying, I think can help the listener to kind of take a look back and step back and look at what's happened over the last 30 years that has set us all up to be very, very vulnerable now, where, most people, what's so scary is that most people are not healthy anymore.
Right.
We have to fight for our health. We have to go way outside the norm to regain our health and to maintain our health now.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you said that better than I ever could. So it's hard. I mean, in COVID-19, what do? Oh, they closed the bathrooms, they closed the farmers market. You only get, glyphosate laced food, processed food. So, and that only under duress of wearing a mask in a grocery store that's so heavily sprayed with toxins, you can't even breathe that cleaner that's in the store. It's just a nightmare. So, we're losing weight because I won't go to the store.
Yeah, it's been, I was in the store this morning, and it was, let's just put it this way, I won't go back into the store. I refuse to go back in there because now I'm being forced to wear a mask. My glasses fog up. I feel claustrophobic. I actually started to feel a little lightheaded, and I didn't know if that was because I was feeling upset or if because I really wasn't getting enough oxygen. A lady in the store, so I pulled the mask down just right to here. I know that the masks are not working anyway. It's a false sense of security. I pulled it right down here, A, so that I could see where I was walking, and B, so that I could feel like I was actually getting some air. And I got a very snark remark from a lady in Whole Foods who works there and says, "You're going to have to leave the store if you don't cover your nose." And I said, "Well, I can't see if I cover my nose. My glasses completely fog over." And I felt so uptight about it. I just refused to go to the store. My husband said that he would do it for us.
Yeah, what we actually made was we had a little card that somebody in my church group made for us, and she even laminated it and put it in a clip, and it said, "I have a lung injury. I cannot wear a mask. The American Disabilities Acts and the HIPAA Acts say you can't ask me what my disability is, and you'll get fined if you deny me access to this store." So we just wear it like a kindergartner on our
Wear it on us, yeah.
And
yeah.
I won't go in the store either, but my husband, he's 81 and he does have COPD, and he's so funny. He's like, "Oh, thank you very much for protecting me." He's so funny. So he just keeps going. And if they try to stop him, he acts like, I don't know what it was, at Peter Falk in Columbo, where he was just this dumb guy. Everybody just thinks he's his big teddy bear and they leave him alone. And
oh my gosh.
Coffee, and I love it.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Let's circle back around for a minute, because
Right.
you said something that I think that we should go down this road now. Is you said we shouldn't be fearing COVID. We shouldn't be fearing this coronavirus.
Right.
Let's go down that road and talk a little bit more about what we need to be careful about, like what's really going on here that we need to be fearful of. Or maybe not fearful of. I don't want to say that, because you know what? I want to retract that statement. Because we don't need to be fearful, we need to be educated. So what is it that we need to be aware of so that we can stand up and be able to do something about it and come together? Because, there's a lot of concerns right now.
Right. I think the most important thing to be aware of is that everything we're being mandated to do by our governors, our federal government, our state legislators, anything else is not only dangerous, because you mentioned you get lightheaded. Imagine that construction worker 15 floors up on a building. And I've had my friends and colleagues saying, "Please help us here in Riverside County, California, because our husbands are going to die as they pass out and fall off that ladder, or as you are." I mean, can you imagine anything like driving in a car in a mask? Really? You're all alone, you're in a car and you're in a mask, and it's the same car you got in the last 4 years. Really? And that when you're driving that car, you can get lightheaded, you can pass out, you can have a car accident. It's not a trivial matter. So look at all of the measures that we've been told to do that are unconstitutional, that are against American Disabilities Act, HIPAA Act. Say you have anything, if you have asthma, you're at risk. Can't wear a mask. Look at the requirements to get a flu vaccine. So I can't walk in that grocery store and buy a roll of toilet paper, but I can get a live flu vaccine causing an upper respiratory infection in a compromised elderly person, and then they put on a mask and they continue in an immune suppressed environment to replicate that virus and create an explosion, which can be so inflammatory that it could cause a sudden cardiac arrest.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that for just a second.
Okay.
I want to make sure everybody understands that. So when you go get a flu vaccine and you get that injected into your body, it actually causes a live infection in your body, maybe in a small amount, not so much that supposedly that people will get sick, although some people do get very sick from the vaccine. Yeah. But nevertheless, they've been exposed to a live infection through the injection. Now, when they're breathing,
they're shedding.
Where they are shedding. And that's one of the ways that the body detoxes is through breath as well. Yeah. So the body is trying to get rid of it, but you're wearing a mask. So you're rebreathing it, essentially causing a higher concentration of that infection in your body that has a higher likelihood of killing you.
Yeah. And that inflammatory response, that cytokine storm, that depletion of the intracellular glutathione, that oxidative stress. Well, that's what all upper respiratory infections do, whether microbial or viral. And then if you're really in a bad place, you get the Prevnar on the same day with a boatload of aluminum in it. And that doesn't necessarily shed. That's recombinant pieces of parts, but it further cripples your immune system. And so when you drop dead while you wear that mask, and again, you can be shedding through the mask, so you're not protecting anybody else. And as we remember a few years ago, nurses that refused the flu vaccine were forced to wear the mask. So we used to use hashtag ask for the mask because we knew those were the people who weren't shedding virus on people who were immune compromised, walking into hospitals and cancer therapy programs. I mean, I still can't comprehend that they vaccinate cancer patients who are by definition so immune compromised that they've got cancer, and those chemotherapies have further, and radiation therapies compromise them, and they would inject them. That's just, I was with a patient, and it's really not funny. And Dr. Rossetti was with me a few months ago, and I pointed as the person went to get blood drawn for their test, and I pointed to the sign, and he's like, yeah, you got to kill him with vaccine before you kill him with the chemotherapy. That way you're not held liable, because there's no liability if you kill him with the vaccine. And
yeah.
Like, not funny.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And what's so sad is that people just so blindly go and get it because they believe these initiatives put out by the government, without questioning it.
And they're doctors. How can an oncologist do that? So that's why, like, as you said earlier, Elena, we focus on educating. We've got to re-educate our entire medical system. No. This is, and so that's the good news in COVID-19. If everybody realizes this is a plague of corruption intended to take away our rights. So we simply must reject any unconstitutional laws and remove any officials, governors, I don't really care, mayors in New York who denied religious freedoms. Really, if you don't close your church, I'll close it forever for you. Not in America. Not some mayor. No, that you don't get to override constitutional freedoms. And this is the first thing that we should be doing, saying, no, this is my constitutional freedom. My, as a human being, I walk on the beach. What's the public health measure of shutting a beach? You can't possibly, healthy people walking down the beach cannot make somebody sick. If you're healthy, do you go for a run on the beach? Yeah. If you're sick, do you go for a run on the beach? No, You stay home and you drink chicken soup and you don't run that day because you don't really feel good. What did we used to say if you had a virus? Oh, don't exercise because you'll make yourself sicker because that's the inflammation. So, and there's a nice breeze on that beach today. You know, viruses transmit when you cough through the little water droplets that you can't even see. They go through that mask. Some of them hit you back in the face, but they go through that mask. But they certainly, as they hit the dry air and fall to a surface a couple of feet away, nobody's getting sick, and certainly not a healthy person. How can that one little droplet, and that one little droplet, does it contain a viral particle? No. If you've got RNA that you had to scrape out of your throat and amplify a million times in order to even call yourself positive for having those RNA sequences that are a tenth of a virus, are you really going to cough something if you had to amplify it a million times? Nobody's ever shown it in the saliva. That's why I mentioned that I isolated blood from the saliva of AIDS patients they were AIDS patients. Even healthy people carrying HIV won't infect another healthy person. The commercials are all on the TV. So every public health measure they have said will actually cause you more immune suppression, compromise your immune system, close a public restroom. Oh, so we'll pee in the streets. That's really good for public health. And yet the signs are everywhere here in California. Public health and safety code, wear a mask. And I say, no, I take it down. We take them off the beach. We remember the 60s when they said, keep Mother Nature out. You remember that song, sign everywhere, sign. Do this, don't do that. Well, we're there. We're back there again, back to the days of the 60s when Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy Sr. were fighting for our freedoms. So it's just another form of tyranny. And it's the worst kind ever because it's biowarfare against our own people, against our own country, perpetrated by the heads of our public health officials in HHS. And that's why I say they should be convicted of treason.
Dr. Judy, let me ask you this. We're seeing a lot of doctors in different parts of the country. A lot of these are ER doctors coming out in videos on social media saying that some of the treatment recommendations from the CDC are actually making patients worse. And then we see a lot of these videos being removed or censored from social media. A lot of interviews with you have also been censored and removed from social media. And you have a lot of everyday people out there who have a really hard time believing that there's some type of censorship here happening. What is your take on this? What's your take on the treatments that are being recommended? And then what's your take on this censorship that seems to be happening?
Well, as I mentioned, not one of the treatments that is recommended is helping. In fact, the data is pretty clear they're hurting. The ventilators are killing people, the ER docs, other docs that say the masks are insane. Even Tony Fauci said, oh yeah, the mask serves no purpose. So who does it hurt? The compromised. The flu shot hurting people, we've discussed it. The remdesivir, the new drug that is going to save everything. Well, you know what? You kind of manipulated those trials, and it's really actually probably pretty dangerous. But our FDA is going to fast track it and improve it while we have simple type 1 interferon, simple vitamin C, simple zinc, a simple colloidal silver, washing your hands with soap, the same things we would do any year for a corona or any other kind of upper respiratory infectious agent. And yet you're promoting everything unhealthy, and everything we say is censored. Because it's the truth. So if people, that we are censored from free speech in America is one thing, but, I've been waiting for in fact, I had an interview for Plague of Corruption on NBC News yesterday, and they canceled it. Why did they cancel it? Oh, the legal department was afraid. Who's funding our major news networks? It's really as simple as follow the money. Oh, Merck, all the commercials, all the drug companies, we talked about that. recently. So we're only one of 2 countries in the world that allow direct to consumer advertisement of drugs. And so, so we have all these ads on TV. And as Bobby Kennedy Jr. reminded me the other day, in a non-election year, 70% of all TV networks are supported. So the actors and the actors are supported by pharmaceutical companies. So the money, everything is skewed, and any other voice in this country is getting censored. But the big mistake they made is hold everybody at home and give them Zoom classes and Zoom platforms. And now all of a sudden we're going to get paid not to go to work, which is, the American dream. Can you imagine? We didn't have tax day this year. So it's like, oh, okay. And so people are sitting around like you and me today, and we get up in the morning, we put on a suit and we go to work. It's, you don't even know if I have pants on. As my husband says, you'll scare them, Judy. But at any rate, so we go and we sit and we drink coffee and we talk, and people have nothing better to do, and they're listening and they're seeing the alternative networks, and they're seeing the message, and they're reading the books, or they're comparing the news on the TV and the news on their computer. And they're like, yeah, why would she say that? Oh, did you know Deborah Burke's daughter is the associate director or some kind of director of the Gates Foundation? So here's Scarf Lady standing up there saying, oh, we're going to liberally define the most liberal definition possible for what COVID-19 is. So as we understand it, if you jump out of a plane without your parachute, you will be diagnosed as death due to COVID-19. No, okay, this is insanity, and everybody can see the insanity. What do you mean liberal diagnosis? Even people who have no medical background. What do you mean? My 80, the average age of death is 80.1. I see, World War II veteran died of complications of COVID. Oh, is that because the ambulance didn't arrive at his house? Is that the complication? Is that because there was a do not resuscitate, or you were told to use a ventilator instead of oxygen, simple oxygen cannula in the nose? Is that complications from COVID? But it's not funny because they're burying the evidence. They're burying the evidence of who they've killed. Nobody gets to look and see, oh, wait a minute, the autistic kids have no glutathione, have horribly messed up DNA methylation machinery, have those inflammatory signatures where anything you do to them is throwing gasoline on a fire. Oh, who's dying first? Oh, the very people we injured over the last 4 decades. 50 million Americans were the controls with XMRVs, with the mouse, monkey, bird, and other gamma retroviruses, with Borrelia. Who's gonna die? With chronic Lyme disease. Oh, they are, because they already have mast cell activation disorder. What does that mean? They've already got a primed pump, and the minute you throw a teeny bit of gasoline on that fire, that next vaccine you're going to mandate, you'll kill them. And then nobody will ever know, because you've buried them in mass graves. You've liberally diagnosed everything as COVID-19. It'll look like the Spanish flu that killed 50 million Americans, and it's a plague of corruption.
It absolutely is. And I felt that, that was unbelievable when I first saw that coming out in the news. It really helped me put more pieces of the puzzle together right away, because why else would there be cover up as to, why would you come out and label everything as a death that was caused from COVID? There's no other explanation other than they're trying to bury evidence. They're trying to create more fear around this, so that then they can come up with their, with this, so that then they can be the saviors and have the solution, which is another vaccine that's going to just really, it's really scary, because, we know that more people are going to get sick, more people are going to die. And we're trying to, spread that message out there. And I'm so proud of the doctors. I'm sure you are too. So proud of these MDs who are standing up around the country I mean, of course, just like anybody else, they don't want to lose their license. They're amazing doctors. They're critical thinkers. They're the ones that are not killing people because they're not following the agendas of using using the ventilators that are killing people. They're coming out and speaking truth, and I mean, I'm so proud of them because they are also, just like you are, just like we are, trying to spread a message that that what's going on is total corruption, and it's going to lead to a huge demise of not only populations of people in the US and around the world, but this is leading to the loss of our constitutional rights, a lot of the things that are going on right now.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, that is the silver lining, that doctors are waking up and saying, what? We did the testing. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing antibodies. That means people are immune. What's your vaccine going to do? Make an antibody? Oh, okay. Doesn't a person with an antibody not need a vaccine? And what wouldn't the person that's re-exposed once they have an antibody, do something called antibody dependent cellular cytotoxicity? That means kill your own cells and drive that flame, throwing gasoline on a fire. So why are you injecting every single person on the planet when most of the planet's already immune? And the injection is going to kill everybody. So why are you injecting anybody at all? Well, because you can, because you've scared them, because we've taken love out of the equation. We're not allowed to touch people. We're scared of people. People are committing suicide because they had the infection and they recovered. Now they're not allowed in the military. I saw this morning, oh, if you had COVID-19, you can't rejoin the military. If you had a positive test, doesn't that remind you what they did the military and HIV? Yeah, that's what they did. How many times did they get to do this to us, where they kill the first responders, the lab workers, the nurses, the doctors, the military? Those are the people most heavily vaccinated and most heavily injured. And now we're a country who's patriotic. We honor people on football fields while we kill them. It makes no sense. None.
Dr. Judy, we have some questions coming in from our live listeners. And so I want to get to a couple of these while we have just a few minutes left. And I think this is a great question because we have a lot of people listening who have no medical background, no science background. They're getting all their news and their information from watching the news and turning on the TV. So Jessica asks if she can have some kind of explanation to help her understand the truth about how dangerous this virus actually is.
I think the clearest information about the truth of how this dangerous virus actually is, I take from Del Bigtree's TheHighWire.com, his Highwire show of a couple of weeks ago. Look for it. So what he reported there was and all doctors and all testing, and he had a number of doctors on there, 0.1%, that's 1 in 1,000, to 0.003 to 1 in 300 people, could even be 10,000, will ever die. And those are the people with significant comorbidities. So this isn't even as dangerous as the usual influenza seasons. That means if you're basically healthy, you're going to be sick. You might cough for a little while. And this is a severe cough. So I won't tell you it's not a severe cough. And I won't tell you that measures don't need to be taken. And I was talking to the lovely Dr. Daniel Newsom last night, who some of his family came over and they got quite sick, but he has a method and natural products. What we do with he does with herbs and medicine. So he was overnight able to treat this. So we're overnight with smart naturopathic doctors, other doctors, able to understand this and treat this. So you're not at risk. And when the government tells you all these people are asymptomatic carriers, no, those are by definition healthy people. You don't carry a coronavirus, you clear it with your immune system, or you never get infected if exposed in the first place. And this is what Del's show of a few weeks ago, and Del and those doctors really explain it at a level where Jessica will really understand it. It's essentially zero risk, and everything else, the measures that are taking, are what's going to destroy the health of our families. I mean, I'm not used to seeing my husband that many hours a day. So I'm just saying. We're getting really fat.
Yeah. So what, one of the things that I heard you say there is that the measures that are being taken now, that's what's going to lead people to getting sick. And so, and I've heard you speak about this. I have spoken with this about my patients. I'm sure Dr. Newsom has spoken, with his following about this. I know Dr. Newsom, by the way, he's an amazing guy. Love that guy. And he's such a good teacher too, right? He's really good at explaining stuff and simplifying complex, ideas and stuff. But staying inside all the time, bad for your immune system. Right. Because you're not exposing yourself to all the viruses and bacteria that we normally expose ourselves to every day that actually help keep our immune system activated and strong, and helps to keep, helps us keep from getting sick, right? And then we've got the stressors of, all of the fear that we're being fed. A lot of people are having then on top of that even more stressors of, they're out of work, and that's just causing them, extreme amount of stress and fear, right? And then wearing the masks, like that's another one, right? I mean, that's, so all of these things combined, and not getting outside where, that, apart from being exposed to other viruses and bacteria, that is actually good for us to be exposed to these things. Being outside and getting fresh air, getting sun where we can get vitamin D, which helps also to regulate our immune system and our inflammatory responses in our body, like all of that's basically being taken away from us. And so, Dr. Mikovlts has talked about this. For all of you who are listening, I've heard her other interviews where she has talked about this. And, this is very, very important for you to get outside as much as you can, get outside, expose yourself to the sun, expose yourself to your environment, because if you don't do that, then you are further setting yourself up to get sick again, later. And there are some other topics that we, totally are excited to hit with you, because there's so much in your message that we feel that needs to be spread. And we're already working on different ways to get the message spread out. So I can't wait to talk with you about this, to let you know what we're doing on our end to help spread your message. But we do have a couple of other topics, different areas that we want to talk about that hit on things that you talk about in your book. So, we are super excited to get to have our other interviews with you. But I think Anne did have a couple of other questions she wanted to ask.
Yeah, happy. And we're going to talk several times in the next few weeks. I think Monday, right?
Yes, on Monday. We definitely want to dive further into the whole vaccine issue and get some real explanation on that, because we have a lot of questions that people come with about, around the vaccines. But this one here, I think, is another interesting one to address. Talk a little bit about herd immunity. How long does herd immunity take to develop? And, is that something we're looking to have happen here with coronavirus?
Well, I think the data support. So what herd immunity really means is that, remember, all those healthy people. So they made antibodies. So they've been exposed, they're immune, they're protecting those who are compromised and can't develop the immunity, the very young and the very old. So it's clear in South Carolina, and I think in Sweden, where they didn't do as drastic stay at home, only the very sick or the compromised stayed at home, and the rest of the family went out and went to work and used those, the sunlight and everything that Dr. Elena was just talking about to boost their immunity. And then they go home and everyone's happy, and they, they don't necessarily spread the disease. So I think it's even probably clear that herd immunity exists in several states in the United States, and maybe in the entire United States, because it's clear from the data that it looks like this virus already went through here last November. And it was what was called an influenza season, which was horrible. But in fact, the 80,000 deaths in the severe influenza last year, less than 1,000 were attributed to the influenza. So the flu could have easily been the Wuhan flu, and we could already have developed natural herd immunity. We're immune. That is said to be 70% of the people And I think it's pretty clear that 70% of the people have either antibodies to coronaviruses and are immune even from this particular strain, because the conserved regions to the immune system are what you need to respond. You don't have to develop strain specific immunity. And this is why I've said, don't get an annual flu shot. If you've ever had the flu or you have ever had the flu shot, that's as immune as you need. And so you're only added toxins and risk after that point. So herd immunity, it's pretty clear is likely occurred in the United States. And that's why I continue to encourage President Trump to let everybody go now. Let everybody go back to work. If you're not sick, go to work. And most of the people who are compromised, like my husband, he's 81 years old. He was retired. He didn't go to work anyway. He goes, hangs out on the beach. So they're only hurting his immune system because he can't go out on the beach. And in order to keep myself from getting angry about the masks and things, I stop and pray for everybody that walks by with a mask on, that they wake up, that they trust God. They don't fear. They know we have a natural immune system, and they recognize that, wait a minute, God didn't make us to breathe our own CO2. God didn't make us to wear masks. Why did we never wear a mask before? Because we have an immune system, God given. And if we develop it with natural products, with plants, with healthy food, we'll all be fine.
We got a great point here from Renee, and he's asking, he says, one of the problems right now is that you're being attacked in several online communities and being discredited. What are some sources that people can go to find some research that helps aligns with the research you talk about? Where can people find this research to share it? Credible research that they can share.
I think there are a number of sources. The truth about cancer and the truth about vaccines. We did a panel a few weeks ago. We had a whole meeting. The online summits for nutrition, for the Dr. Sherry Tenpenny has a vaccine research library. She has classes on her website. She's done 40,000 hours of research. She teaches me. I mentioned Del Bigtree and the highwire.com. I mean, there are numerous sources of places where people are really getting the truth. And I love it. I think Del had Zach Bush on yesterday, the brilliant endocrinologist who a couple years ago, we gave back-to-back shows on Del Bigtree's show. And he's like, forget your doctor, know your farmer, eat healthy food. So there's so many resources, and Autism One is going virtual this year. So now most families with injured kids, and it's more than just Autism One. It's going to be Gardasil injury. It's going to be Dell. It's going to be Dr. Buttar. It's going to be Sherry Tenpenny, Dietrich Klinghardt, Joe Mercola. I've given lectures for Dietrich and Joe Mercola. So these doctors' education sites where they educate people, there's so much available right now that people can find alternatively and get the real sources. And just like our books, our two books are thousands of pages of references, in our website, plaguethebook.com. It got censored. It got taken down yesterday, but I'm sure our webmistress, Cheryl, will get it up as soon as possible. And it's fine. People know my phone number. I don't care. So call me. I'll try to help you, but we can direct people. There's so many fabulous healthcare, natural healthcare sources and doctors who have stepped up there and educated whole patient populations. So now more than ever. So I think it's May 20th through the 24th. You're going to be able for free to see every lecture you want at Autism One. So 4 days, the gift of not traveling is you don't have to take your sick kids out, and you're at home and you can watch the whole thing. And we even sit in exhibitor halls. So because of the technology, we can go and we can sit and you can ask us questions. So we did a panel yesterday with Stephanie Seneff with glyphosate, with Arthur Krigsman, with Dr. Richard Deeth. We were talking about type 1 diabetes, and in the autistic and the development. I talked about vaccine courts. So we have Bobby Kennedy Jr. will be there. Del Bigtree will be there. I think Dr. Klinghardt will be there. So it's there and it's on your screen and it's free. And so there's so many opportunities now to learn and to share. And most of us will sit there in those panels. I think it was a couple hours last night, and we had a really good conversation. And I think, it might revolutionize medicine. So in the future, those that can't be present physically can actually always not feel left out.
Yeah, I think that's so wonderful. We have amazing resources that are just coming out left and right. And, for the listeners, you guys, take note of this. A lot of these doctors that are coming up and speaking on these different, documentaries and these different webinars and stuff that Judy is talking about, these are mainstream medical doctors who saw that there was a problem. They opened their eyes and they started looking at what was happening to their patients. When their patients were becoming injured or their patients were not getting better, they opened their eyes. They maintained their stance of critical thinking on their own and not just following the agendas that they were being given. And they were able to see what was really going on. And these people are standing up not for themselves. They're doing it to help you. They're standing up against the odds, right? Because it's a lot easier for them to continue doing what the other MDs are doing or the other DOs are doing because they're fearful to lose their license. They just want to get a paycheck so they can take care of their families, and these other ones that you're going to hear from, they're standing up and they are trying to help. And so take advantage of the time that you have right now and educate yourself. And I just wanted to circle back around to the vaccine thing just really, really quick. Okay. So please correct me if I'm wrong, because again, this is not my expertise, all right? But the concept of a vaccine, couldn't you say that, the concept of a vaccine, like, it's pretty cool actually, and almost like homeopathic kind of in nature? I mean, you're using nature to your advantage by giving just a tiny, tiny dose of it, not enough to make you sick, but enough to get your immune system exposed so that your immune system knows what to do next time. So it's not that the vaccines are evil. It's what's been done to the vaccines. It's what's been put into the vaccines and how they've been manipulated that is evil.
Right, exactly. And that the liability was removed in 1984 and 86, and no safety testing's been done since as required by federal law. So we don't know how much damage they can do. And interesting you should say this, because we can make a safe vaccine. I can literally take coronavirus and essentially any other coronavirus, and I say I, but it's always the royal we scientists, and we purify it. We purify it to just that infectious agent, and then we deliver it in a capsule away from the lungs. You deliver it to the bone marrow, to the immune cells where, most of the endocannabinoid system is that responds by keeping the fire low. We have publications that show us that if we transiently block the cannabinoid 1 receptor, and I'll be talking about this in my talk at Autism One if I ever write it, but theoretically I'm going to do that before tomorrow. And so you can take that modulate, take advantage of our knowledge of the cannabis system. So I call it the dimmer switch. The flame can't get too high. So present it right at the source of and to the antigen presenting cells. This is immunology, and give it a little curcumin, so the anti-inflammatory, so the fire can't get too high. So you will develop specific antibodies and a breadth in the very young and the very old mice. So you've got your solution right there, and you can plug and play every virus that comes down to the pipe and deliver to the immune cells right where you need the response. Change everything.
Sorry. Dr. Judy, we got several people asking where to get your book. One more time, your website, so people can go there. That's the best place for them to get your book.
No, our book is sold by all major booksellers.
Okay, perfect.
Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, India. And it's published by Simon Schuster and Skyhorse. Our website, plaguethebook.com. I have lectures. I have things that we've talked about. I'll have the registration, the free registration link for Autism One there, the meetings, and you can find out when I'm talking. So that's right there on the site. I hope we'll have it up by tomorrow. It got taken down yesterday, but soon. But really, Amazon, they're still sold out. It's a bestseller, but you can get the Kindle version. And if anybody pre-orders the book for when it's in stock and they write me, I'll simply give them the electronic version while they wait for their copy. So hopefully will be released free to in society soon. So I don't want to waste all this time when they could be reading this book. And it really is a quick 3-hour read. And I say to most people, if you have no other time, simply read the foreword by Bobby Kennedy Jr., and which walks through generations of this kind of censorship and corruption, not only with vaccines, but with glyphosate toxicity, with GMO corruption, with the kinds of things like mercury and the other environmental toxins. So really an eye opener. Just gratitude for him for doing that. And then read the last chapter, which is really good news.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We're encouraging everybody to get these books so that you can educate yourself, because a lot of things are being censored, but so far the government has not started book burning yet. So get your books while you can. I say that because I'm just so angry at everything going on.
Right.
But we have some great topics that are coming up with Dr. Judy Mikovlts. We are going to be talking about we're going to dive more into solutions, things that we can do if we do get sick. Okay, we can talk about that on Monday, right, Dr. Judy? We can talk about that. We have actually helped many of our own clients using vitamin C, nebulizing silver, things like that. I'm pretty sure I had it back in November because I've never had anything like it before. And once I started my own protocols, I got better pretty quickly. It actually cleared up within a couple of weeks. So we've got other topics. For all of you that have been asking the questions, we will compile these questions so that we can help direct the conversation. Dr. Judy, do you think that's a good idea? We can kind of direct the conversation.
That would be nice, to answering the questions that we started today, and then we can keep drilling down. I think it's on Monday, right?
Yes, we're going for part 2 on Monday, and then also for any of you who came in halfway through or whatever, or you didn't have a chance to listen to it. I know someone mentioned earlier they're in the middle of a move and they were trying to hear it on their phone and they were losing reception. We have the recording. We'll send it out to you in our email. If you're not signed up for our newsletters, be sure to go to our website, modernholistichealth.com, sign up for our newsletter so that you can get it. We'll be sending it out in the next week or so. And then also, we have some really big master classes that are going to be going out to literally thousands and thousands of people. And we're going to have these interviews as bonus material. And so we have many of the top influencers in the health and wellness industry around the country who are going to be helping us to spread the message on mental health and neurodegenerative disease issues, and bringing evidence-based, data-driven approaches to helping to fix these issues. And we also have some anti-aging and some other things coming out, and we're going to be adding it to these programs that are going out. We're going to be adding these interviews there so that you're going to get just a wealth of information, and you're going to get to hear Dr. Judy's message and share it with your friends and family also. Thank you so much, Dr. Judy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elena and Ann. I've appreciated and enjoyed the day, and I'll look forward to talking to you Monday.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So much.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.